Welcome to this edition of Active Living. Today we're very fortunate to have Ed Peters with us. Ed is in charge of the Ham Radio Club that's here at the Orion Center. So Ed, welcome to our club.
Well, thank you, George. It's nice to have you invite me in for a sit down.
Well, we want to learn a little bit more, and hopefully if people see this program, we can entice some other people to come in and join your club.
Okay, that's very nice of you.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the Ham Radio Club. What's the real purpose of this Ham Radio Club that you got?
Well, we
here?
started out in the old senior center, and the whole idea was that the guys that started out, which is George Schutte, Mike Nibble, and Carl Boggs, the idea was to set up a place where people interested in ham radio, amateur radio, that didn't have room in their backyard to put up an antenna or radio equipment. They could come and join us and sit in, and they'd have a place, a ham shack, to broadcast from.
Okay.
You know, and we started out when they started out in I think around 2003.
Okay.
We had close to 20 people sign up.
Really?
And because the equipment was pretty sparse, they eventually dropped out, and there was the original 3, and then I joined in 2006. And most of our equipment we have today is donated.
Okay.
Some of it is guys got out of the service in World War II and they bought radios, and now they're deciding they don't want the equipment anymore, and so they donate it to us. And the equipment is still good. I mean, if it breaks, you have a hard time finding parts for it. There's crystals.
Right.
There's tubes, and then today's technology is all printed circuit boards.
Right. Can you tell us a little bit about the purpose of the club? Is there any safety factors involved, or do you get involved in national emergencies, or what do you guys actually do?
Well, that's part of it. There's 3 phases to having a ham radio license.
Okay.
The first is a hobby itself.
Okay.
You know, and making friends all over the world and talking, and you can do that by either by phone, which is voice.
Right.
You can do it by key,
right.
and the Morse code keys that they're using today, some of them, the fist pounders, are when you watch an old Western, it's the same key.
Right.
And the difference between the Morse code from the Old West and today, they've shortened some of the words down.
Okay.
So basically, worldwide, they're using the same language when you use the Morse code. And then there's hooking your radio up to your computer, and it's like sending email.
Okay.
So you can do email, and there's 5 or 6 different types of communication you can do over the typewriter. And then there's slow scan TV, and then there's fast scan TV. So depending on what part of the hobby you want to enjoy, you can do that. That's the first part.
Right.
The second part of the hobby is promoting the hobby, and that's basically what we're doing here to build the interest in people from the age of, I think the youngest ham operator we have is 8 years old. Wow. And the oldest one, I don't know how old he is. He's probably in his hundreds someplace.
Okay.
So, and that's building a membership, building a club up.
Right.
Now the third part is community service. And there's various different things you can do for community service. A weather announcement comes on and says we're having severe weather warnings. Now, our particular group, most of us belong to the county group also. Okay. And when a severe weather warning comes out, we go into watching the sky. Now, the weather station over in White Lake sends out a radar signal. And the radar signal goes out at an angle. And by the time it gets, say, from White Lake over to Oxford or Leonard or wherever, that lower level of that radar is maybe 50,000 or 60,000 feet above the ground. Okay. So they can see the weather that's in that area, but they can't tell what's on the ground. So the important part of having weather spotters on the ground is give an indication if there's a straight line wind that's underneath that radar signal, or a torrential rain, or you're having sleet, or whatever. So, and what we do is the net is set up at the county, and the Weather Bureau also has a ham radio operator, an amateur radio operator, and he monitors not only his weather station but the other weather stations, emergency operation centers. So in southeast Michigan, you might have 5 different emergency operation centers with ham radios that are connected to the weather station and the other weather stations around Michigan and even Ohio. And so the weather spotter's on the ground, you see severe weather coming in, and you report it. You report the estimated wind speed over 45 miles an hour, hailstones bigger than a size of a penny or M&M, flooding across the roads. And if nothing's going on, you stay off the radio. Unless you have an emergency situation.
Right.
And we also have radios in all southeast Michigan in their hospitals have weather radio, not weather radios, but amateur radios. And that's for if there's a pandemic or say a major car wreck or a big explosion or whatever, and the hospital is overwhelmed and the communications are down because cell phones are only good for 10% usage at one time. So if we have an emergency event, and everybody's on that cell phone trying to get through,
it's not going to work.
Only 10% of the people.
90% are not going to get through.
That's true. And if it's a severe weather event and your telephone lines are down, you know, your cell towers are down, even though it's only 10% used, maybe your cell towers are down too. So the radios in the hospitals, an operator will go in there, and in the county, the head medical person from Oakland County will sit in there so he can coordinate the activities.
Right.
And you call in and say, well, this hospital, we have enough beds for more people.
Okay.
We're short of medicine. We need more staffing. We would like some police to come in and assist because of the volume of traffic. We need a little crowd control.
Right.
All right. So that's southeast Michigan. On a bigger picture, now not on this radio, but our high frequency radio, when there was an earthquake in Chile,
right,
the United States had some people down there, some missionaries or whatever, and the same thing within the Bahamas and throughout the world. There's a national traffic system that goes on. So somebody down there would, because the power's out, he's got a ham radio,
right,
and he's got a car battery or a solar panel, and he's running his radio. So he transmits to another station. That station transmits, maybe they go from the Bahamas to Florida.
Right.
Florida goes up to Ohio. And then Ohio comes into Michigan, or if somebody is needed in any of the other states. And it goes from the East Coast to the West Coast. And there's a time frame in the 24 hours that the national traffic system is. So if I went, like tonight at 10:15, there's traffic for Michigan, for this area, southeast Michigan. So an operator will get on there and he'll receive traffic, and then everybody tuned in, if they're in that area, they'll pick up the traffic and make the telephone call or whatever. So you have an earthquake in the Bahamas or tidal wave, and they'll get in touch with somebody in Florida, they get in touch with somebody in Michigan, and it happened. We had some missionaries from some church in Detroit, and they were over in Bangladesh or someplace, I don't remember where they were, and the tidal wave went through, and they got a hold of somebody in the ham radio, and the ham radio transmitted the message and says everybody's fine here, you know. But you don't give an address,
right?
You don't give a name, you just the congregation at Detroit Baptist on 22nd Street, everybody's fine, you know. So that's basically the way that works. Now, in locally, over in Rochester, the ham radio group helps out with the Brooksy Way.
Okay.
When they have the Woodward Cruise, ham radio people go down there and help out with the Brooksy Way.
And what do they do? I mean,
they station on the corner,
right?
All right, instead of having a cop on every corner,
Right.
you have a emergency radio communicator there.
Right.
Somebody has a heart attack, you call it in and they can send an ambulance.
Right.
You see a little row going on, you call it into your net control and they can send the police out to that area.
Okay, so I know you guys did it here in Lake Orion for Crop Walk, right?
Crop Walk, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
that was, I saw you guys on the corner there and doing your thing.
And what the idea was that it's about a 5-mile walk around Orion Oaks.
Right.
So we stationed people periodically through there in case there was somebody that sprained an ankle.
Right.
And one of the guys, James Dowell, who was an anthropologist professor over at Oakland University, was on his bicycle, and he cruised up and down the whole length of the thing, back and forth, and checked on everybody,
making sure everybody was okay.
And then last spring, I guess it was, we did a ALS walk over to Kensington Park.
Okay.
So
that's a nice service you guys provide in terms of helping with safety in some of these local events.
Well, it's part of getting your amateur radio license is to give back to the community.
Okay.
So that's basically what it is. And in other states, like in Wisconsin and Minnesota, we had a bad storm yesterday, and what they'll do is go out on snowmobiles. They'll set up a net control, and they'll go out on snowmobiles and check the highway to make sure that nobody's stuck in a snowbank. And I think last year they saved maybe 250 people.
Wow.
So
now you talked about a license. Can you tell me what's involved in terms of, let's say I want to become a ham radio operator.
Okay.
What do I need to do to become a ham radio operator?
Well, there's 3 basic licenses. There's a tech, and basically the tech gives you the operating principles of the radio and protocol for the radio, what to talk about and what not to talk about, and how to conduct yourself. And that's basically what it is. It's just the basic operation of the radio. That's tech. The general, that gives you a little bit more knowledge about how the radio frequencies work and how the radios work and what to do to keep your neighbors safe, because you don't want to put up a big tower and an antenna and then start running power and finding out that your neighbor can cook French fries in his second-story bedroom. So
well, that happened with me with CB radio. I could transmit on my CB radio and it would come through somebody's television.
Yes, yes, that happens. But the manufacturer of all your radio equipment is supposed to fix it.
Right. Your
personal radio, not the federal regulated radio.
Okay.
Like your television, your stereo. This happened to a friend of mine. He's got a 90-foot tower.
Okay.
And I don't think he was running. He said he wasn't running any power, but so he got on 20 meters, and his neighbor called him up on the phone. And he says, "You're coming in over my stereo speakers."
Yep.
And the stereo speakers weren't. The stereo wasn't on.
Oh, really? So he's pushing some power through there.
Yes. And when you're talking about CB, that happened to me when I had my CB probably 40 years ago. I was looking for my buddy. We were going to meet him at the White Horse Inn after work. And so I pulled in to the parking lot, and I'm calling him on the radio, and nothing happened. And I walked in, and he motioned me over to the table. He says, "Sit down." He says, "You were coming in over the band's speakers." So, and then my neighbor across the street, I'd come home from work, and he'd call me up. He says, "You're messing with my TV." And I says, "It's not me." I says, "I didn't even have my radio on." So 40 years later, I'm talking to this person I know, and he says, "Oh yeah, we lived down here around the corner from you, and we were running power." I says, "I was getting blamed for you interfering with everybody's TV." So
Ed, we're gonna take a short break right here. We're going to be back in just a couple minutes.
Okay.
Okay, we'll continue this conversation.
All right.
Very interesting.
So,
got clutter in your garage or cabinets or basement? Does it include hazardous materials like expired medicine, paints, yard maintenance materials, CFL bulbs? The list is long. Not sure what to do with them? The Orion Township Committee has coordinated participation in area-wide no-haz days where you can drop the material off. Great, but you don't have to wait for special days. The committee has identified local businesses that will accept drop-offs on a daily basis all year long for free. Great solution. Get rid of hazardous materials regularly and keep them from ending up in landfills as part of your regular trash pickup. The Orion Environmental Resources flyer gives all the details, types of materials, and businesses that will accept them. You can get a copy of the flyer at the Orion Library, the Community Center, or Township Hall, or online at www.oriontownship.org under General Information, the Environmental section.
Okay, we're back with Ed Peters from the Ham Radio Club here in Lake Orion. And Ed, we want to pick up where we kind of left off. We talked about the various kind of ham radio licenses that people would get. We talked about the original one with the initial one, which was a
tech license.
Then we went to a general
general
license,
and then the extra.
And then you got the third one, which is
right.
what, an extra license.
Extra license. And now this has been downsized. There used to be 5 licenses, and you'd have the novice and
right.
And I don't remember what the rest of them were, but and that's on the test. That's on,
okay.
That's on your tech test.
Okay.
Where we came from and where we're going. But depending on the license you hold is the amount of frequency you can use.
Okay.
And they figured the more you learn, the more you're capable of handling this stuff. And it's also about your frequencies, the amount of power you can use, the radiation coming off your antenna, the direction of your antenna.
Okay.
Basically.
So this is pretty highly regulated in terms of how much capability you have versus how much power you can use, and
yes,
that type of stuff.
And it's all on a volunteer basis.
Okay.
It's self-policing.
Oh, it is.
So you have the Amateur Radio Relay League.
Right.
All right. And in that league, if you are required not to bother anybody.
Right.
With too much power.
Right.
Or not tuning your antenna properly, so you're causing a lot of interference.
Right.
So it's up to you. And if you get a lot of complaints, they turn the complaints into the FCC. The FCC will send you a little letter and say you're not in compliance. And if you continue, the FCC will come knock on your door and write you out a little card that says you owe X number of dollars and confiscate your equipment.
Oh, really? I know. I looked into becoming a ham radio operator when I was in the Navy, and I had a couple of good friends that were ham radio operators. One guy up in Newfoundland when I was up there had a little 50-watt transmitter and worked basically with Morse code, and from there he was talking basically all over the world with people.
Some of the guys in one of the clubs I belong to do nothing but QRP, 5 watts or less.
Really?
On a half a watt, they have made, 130, 140 contacts around the world.
Yeah.
Another guy in the club, he's from England. And what he did, he's a real tinker.
Okay.
So what he did is he took a cigar box and he built a radio in the cigar box, original.
Okay.
Original design from World War II.
Really?
And he says, this is what we used in England for the underground when the Germans were attacking.
Really?
And he says, this is a communication. He says the hardest part was finding the knobs for the radio.
Yeah.
But it's all in a cigar box. And he says, we put them in cigar boxes to hide them. You stick them up on a bookshelf
sure.
and they, somebody comes through there. And he says, it was all done in Morse code.
Well,
but
the thing that kind of scared me away, though, was they said, well, if you want to do ham radio, you have to know Morse code.
Yeah.
But that requirement went away some time ago,
yes,
right?
it did. It went away, I would say 5 years ago, but it was longer than that, maybe 10 years ago.
Okay.
And in the United States, it went away in Europe probably 2 or 3 or 5 years before that.
Okay.
But now, if you get on the radio and you don't know Morse code, the old timers,
right.
the guys that learned it,
the real ham operators.
The real ham operators. They say, where do you get your license? Out of the Cracker Jacks box?
Oh, is that right?
No matter how many manuals you've gone through and studied,
right.
and how much electronics you've gone through and studied, and wavelengths and all this stuff, and you take your test. Now there's 3 tests right now. The first test is for your tech is 35 questions, and you need to answer out of a 350 question pool. There's 35 questions.
Okay.
And you have to answer 28 of them correctly. and that's for tech. For general, there's another 350 questions and a 35 question pool, 28 questions you have to answer correctly.
Yeah.
On your extra, there's 700, I believe it's 750 questions, and you have to answer 35 or 38 out of 50
Okay.
for that. So, and they still give the Morse code if you want to, even though you don't have to do it, they still give the Morse code test, so you can get a certificate of achievement for
Good.
Morse code.
How do they do the test? I mean, you got to be listening to the Morse code. Is
Right.
that done on a computer or?
I don't know what kind of program they set up, but you go over in a corner at a table and put some headphones on. And the one place I went to, it was just you go over in a corner and it's pre-recorded, I think.
Right.
And then they play it over there. So.
And you transcribe it.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't know how much of the correct copy you have to have, but there's so much to it. Now we had a Morse code class downstairs, CW class.
Oh, did you? Okay.
For 8 weeks, and I think the older you get, the harder it is to comprehend. If you're a kid 2 or 3 or 4 years old,
you pick it up real quick.
You can pick it up in a minute. You can pick up a foreign language in 5 minutes if you're a kid.
Right.
You know, it's play. And that happened to a friend of mine. We went down to Mexico, and we were trying to, we had the book, and we were trying to, we went this and went. Kids come over and said, "Oh," and they're rattling off this stuff. The kids are 5 and 7 years old, and they've been playing with the neighbors' kids down there, the
right.
Spanish kids. Oh yeah, Dad wants, and then he rattled all this. Oh yeah, So I says, we could practice this for months at a time, and the kids learn it in a week.
Yeah, that's true. Especially true with languages, and
yeah.
Morse code really kind of is a language, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
It's pretty. Well, for me, it was intimidating, but I never did learn it either.
Yeah.
So
well, just lately, the woman that was pioneer in Morse code for this area, Fisk, and Fisk is the old brass pounder Morse code like you see in the westerns.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah,
right.
Okay. And so she put out tapes on learning Morse code and everything. And I think she's 80 or 90 years old, and she just passed the other day.
Okay.
And I didn't know she was that involved in it, but and somebody mentioned that at a meeting we went to.
Can you tell us a little bit about the equipment that you got here?
Well, this on this little radio here, it's 5 watts, and it's basically a handheld, but you can hook it up to a bigger antenna. The later model radios will take more of an input from a bigger antenna.
Okay.
And this one here happens to be a 3-channel, and there's a special antenna that you can get. It's handheld. Hook it to this radio.
Right.
And you can talk to the space station.
Really?
When the space station goes over.
Wow.
And when we have a meteor shower,
yeah,
you can bounce your signal off the meteor shower and talk. It's limited to like 3 seconds. Hi, how you doing? And then you wait for a reply. This is fine, and you give your call sign and your location, and it's all done really quick because you only have so much time.
Right.
And when the space station goes over, you start over here, and you change your frequency as it gets closer, and then fades away.
Really?
And it's a split signal, so you transmit on one and you receive on another.
Okay.
And then it's I haven't tried it. Some of the other guys that I'm in a club with, they have tried it. When we did field day, and field day is another thing, and we'll get to that in a minute. This radio here you can put in your car or put on your desk. You need a adapter to go from AC to DC if you have it in the house, or it plugs into your cigarette lighter in your car.
Right.
Which they don't recommend, but
really, because it's a 12-volt system, right?
Yeah. But anyway, the best way to do it is wire it right to your battery.
Okay.
And put a fuse. You put a fuse on both sides,
right,
on your plus side and your negative side, so you don't get a short. And this goes from repeater to repeater or simplex, which is like a walkie-talkie. And if you have a good antenna up, we can hit Detroit on simplex.
Okay.
Just off 50 watts.
Well, tell me about this repeater that you just mentioned. What is just exactly what is a repeater?
Well, a repeater is it captures your signal and then transmits it on.
Okay.
And
So
here
it's like an amplifier almost, isn't it?
Yeah.
It takes your signal and shoots it out.
Right.
Makes it a lot more powerful.
Well, yeah. And there's different repeaters stationed all over the county.
Okay.
There's some over in Utica. There's some down in Detroit. The General Motors Radio Club has theirs on top of the Rensen Center.
Really? Whoa, that'd be a great location.
And because I'm high where I live, I can just about hit them on simplex, which is without a repeater.
Right.
It's just going from my antenna to their antenna. Right. But the county has one in Pontiac by the farmers market up on top of Water Tower.
Okay.
And then there's another one, the Clarkston repeater, which is the OCARS, Oakland County Amateur Radio Service Society
right.
Group. They have an antenna which is a backup antenna for the county.
Mm-hmm. Pretty much.
Why should we have a club? I think we mentioned that.
Yep.
Well, like I said before, our club was basically for people, like my yard is, I got a power line in front and a power line in back, and
right.
it kind of hampers putting an antenna in there.
Right.
I'm going to have to finagle around and get one up. But basically, we started a club for people who didn't have antenna privileges in their yard.
Or the money to buy out all the equipment, probably.
And money to buy equipment. We have the equipment, all of our equipment is donated.
Okay.
Rightly. And like I say, some of it's World War II.
A little ancient.
And some of it is a little later. We had some other equipment donated, but the modern stuff is all circuit boards, and the latest stuff is, on your cell phone.
Right.
They have an Echo Link. You can take, if you have a smartphone, you can program that into your cell phone and contact somebody in Texas.
Really?
Or the rest of the world, wherever you want to go.
Didn't know that.
You hook it up to your computer. You can do email, basically ready,
right.
Which is the old teletype.
Right.
Right. A clickety click, which basically was Morse code.
Mm-hmm.
And this dates back. If you look at the history, this goes back to Gutenberg, who had the printing press.
Right.
Got involved when Hiram, I can't think of his last name, went over and talked. The way it was explained to me, Hiram went over and talked to his old friend Groot.
Okay.
And they looked at the alphabet and which letters were most used in composing something.
Right.
So that's the way they developed how many dots and dashes were into the letters.
Okay.
The most used had the less dots and dashes.
Okay.
So this goes back 120 years.
Right. Well, Ed, this has been a really interesting conversation, and we're happy you joined us on Active Living, and we certainly have enjoyed talking to you. I've learned a lot about ham radio, and hopefully we've inspired some interest for some of our people out there that are watching this show. So thanks again for coming.
Oh, you're quite
Appreciate
welcome.
it.